Last time we did question 3 of the January 2019 CSEC English B paper. This time I'll be tackling question 4. I'll plan the essay in a couple of minutes and then I'll get to work on writing it. So first I'll read and try to understand the question. In the exam you'll be able to choose between questions 3 and 4. This time I'll be doing question 4 since I did 3 last time. Suffering, whether emotional or physical, is a common theme in literature. From the prescribed list, choose 2 poems you have studied which focus on suffering. Write an essay in which you focus on this theme in the 2 poems selected. For each poem, describe the situation that causes the speaker to suffer. You must also discuss the impact of the suffering on one speaker's outlook on life. Finally, for each poem, you must examine one device the poet uses to present the theme of suffering. So as usual, we have the 2-1-2 question form. We'll describe the situation that causes suffering in both poems. Then we'll discuss the impact of suffering on one speaker. Then we'll discuss a device used to present suffering in each poem. So let's go through the planning. The planning shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Okay, blank notepad. And from the list of poems, there are quite a number you could choose from in order to discuss suffering. I've decided to use Dulce et Decorum Est and A Stone's Throw, so that's the first thing I'll be writing my essay plan here. Dulce et Decorum Est versus A Stone's. These poems feature lots of juicy suffering, so we can write a good essay on these. So just like last time, I'll plan what my main point will be for each part of the question. Part 1 asks for a situation that causes suffering. So for Dulce, the battlefield experience of the speaker causes suffering. For A Stone's Throw, you can just say being abused by the men causes suffering. These are just notes, so just brief pointers are okay. The notes are just for you. So as long as you can understand what the notes mean, that's fine. CSEC will not be marking your notes. And part 2, I'm planning in less detail than I did last time. If you need to plan in more detail, then go ahead and do that. If you can get away with planning in less detail, that's also fine. Part 2, what's part 2? The impact suffering has on each speaker, on one speaker. Question 4. Not the impact. We're looking at part 2. 2 is about the impact of suffering on one speaker's life. So impact on one speaker. I could easily talk about the impact of suffering on the woman in A Stone's Throw, but I think it will be easier to talk about the speaker in Dulce et Decorum Est. The impact is PTSD. The speaker developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and we see this especially in the nightmares he has about that comrade he saw die. So yeah, PTSD is a real thing. If someone undergoes a very traumatic experience, they might come out of that experience with nightmares, with inability to cope in regular social settings and so on. So a person can be broken by trauma. And part 3, to talk about the devices that show suffering in both poems. Devices that show suffering. 1 device per poem. For Dulce, should I talk about metaphors? There are lots of metaphors. Imagery. I think it's a very graphic poem, so I can do well with imagery. And in your planning, you can think about what examples you want to use, but for this basic plan, I won't be doing that now. It just depends on the level of planning you want to do. A stone's throw, stone. Irony is what I'll work with. There's also a lot of imagery in a stone's throw, but I'll work with irony. Okay, so this is my plan. That took about 5 minutes. Now I'll get into writing the essay. So as usual, I need to start with a hook, an interesting sentence or two to reel the readers in. Okay, talking about pain and suffering. Oh, sorry. It's New Roman font 12. Suffering can break even the strongest person beyond repair. Yeah, I think that's a powerful statement that can get us started. Now I need to mention the 2 poems and link them to the hook and to the theme. So, suffering, this is one way to do it, is a theme that runs through several of the prescribed. Mention the 2 I'll be talking about. Dulce et decorum. Est by Wilfred Owen. It's by Elma Mitchell. Are 2 poems that focus on theme of suffering. Now, just suffering is fine. Suffering. So I have my hook. I've mentioned the poems. So I'm gonna answer part 1 of the question, which deals with the situation that causes suffering in each poem. In Stone. Suffering persona. We like to use the word speaker, but technically the woman who suffers in this poem is not the speaker. The speaker is one of the men who abuse her. So we can say persona. That's more general. The persona, the suffering persona, is a woman who's been caught in the act of adultery. She suffers, of course we have to talk about how she suffers just briefly. She suffers at the hands of what kind of men? Perverse men. Seek to kill her. Yes, this happened in the poem. It's all we need for a stone's throw. Let's go to the next poem. In Dulce et speaker suffers from the experience, traumatic, that's a nice word, the traumatic experience of having served in the military. And particularly, we're getting to a specific thing now, of having watched one of his comrades die a horrific death. Gruesome. Experience, getting into how one speaker has been affected. The experience drastically changes speakers' outlook. Or what kind of change? Causing him to despise war. Yeah, that war is honorable. Finally, we mention the devices. So I'll just check quickly. I have my hook. Mention the poems. I mention the situation that causes suffering in A Stone's Throw and in Dulce. I talk about how the suffering in Dulce changes that speaker's outlook on life. I mention the themes used to explore suffering in each poem. Okay, on to the first paragraph, where I'll answer part 1 of the question. Suffers after the battle. Yeah, this is going to be important. Because of PTSD, we're going to write that out. Post-traumatic. Based on how I read the poem, I assume the speaker has PTSD. He has nightmares and so on about the battlefield experience. So I think it's a justified assumption to make. Stanzas. But this shift, I discussed it in the analysis. The poem switches from past to present tense to show that his suffering is also happening in the present. If you watch my analyses, you'll be able to hopefully remember some of these interesting details. I haven't quoted anything directly from the poem, so I'll try to remember at least one thing that shows that he's currently suffering. He sees, in the poem the speaker says, in all my dreams before my helpless sight. Since I'm using the third person, I'm talking about him. He sees in all. I can't use my because that would sound weird, so I'm gonna input his within square brackets since I'm adding in that word. He sees in all his dreams. You see, I can't remember what exactly he saw word for word, so I'm gonna paraphrase that part. The image of his fellow. More than enough on this guy's suffering, battlefield experience, talk about the PTSD. He was one of the soldiers who were exhausted, wounded, afraid. These are all depicting his suffering, and we talk also about the suffering that he faces after the battle ends. He sees nightmares. Okay, just need a linking word similarly. Let's throw. Suffers physically and emotionally. Surrounded by a group of excited I put this abuse, to put it lightly. Dulce. Yikes. What can I lift directly from the poem to show that I actually know what I'm talking about? She's said to be dead scared. I remember that phrase, dead scared. Later stanzas, it's good to kind of remember how the stanzas work, what's in each stanza, so I can talk about what happens in stanza 1, stanza 2, or at least earlier stanzas, later stanzas. To the physical and sexual abuse she suffers. Bruising is mentioned. Love bites were also mentioned, and is it hail of kisses of stone? mentioned the situation in each poem, and I've also provided examples. On to part 2, we'll look at the impact on one character in Dulce. Can clearly see. It's always better to say something like readers than to say we or I. You don't want to input yourself into the poem too much. He hates war. How do I put that in a more advanced language? He has an aversion to war, and it's the idea. He doesn't like the idea that war should be considered sweet and fitting. I think it would be good to actually mention these exact words, since they're in the meaning of Dulce et decorum est. Dulce et decorum est pro patra mori. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Okay, so in which he says that the phrase Dulce, I think here we can use commonly et decorum est pro patria. If you're going to be writing about this poem, it would be really good to actually remember this Latin phrase, since it's central to the poem's meaning. Which means it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. It's quite a complex sentence. So this is summarized in the last few lines of the poem, in which he says that the phrase Dulce et decorum est pro patra mori is a comma, which means it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country, is a lie. Should we end it there? Paragraph still could take another sentence or two. Okay, the speaker guarantees good experience. We would also believe that it is neither sweet nor. The last paragraph here shows us that if we could see this man die, if we could experience what he experienced, we would also understand that there is nothing good about war. So does this paragraph answer the question of the impact that war has had on the speaker? Changes his outlook on life. Okay, so let's move on to the final part of the question, where we talk about devices. nice kind of generic way to open this paragraph. Let's talk about a stone's throw first. Irony of the poem. Yeah, I think this is a nicer way to say the main irony, or the broad irony, the overarching irony of the poem is that about to really the main irony. These men who are committing this wicked act, they believe that they are carrying out an act of justice. I can go on about this because of the pride pompousness. Ooh, that's good. Because of this pompousness, this self-centered, egotistical pride where they think they're in the right. Okay, I think I've talked about irony enough here. Stones through irony. Okay, that's fine. A quotation from the poem would have been okay, but that's okay. Dulce. It is a nice verb when you're talking about imagery, paint, convey. To remember some words from the poem. The soldiers are said to be what else? Coughing like hags, bloodshot. With fatigue. Anything else? So on. Is emotional suffering. Something about the nightmares. Should be easy. Through the misty pains. Through the misty pains. find that some poems stick in your brain a little bit more in terms of remembering word for word, line for line, while other poems, even though you remember the ideas, it might be more difficult to quote direct words. So in this case, it's a little difficult for me to remember exact words from A Stone's Throw, but maybe because I've read Dulce Decorumist so much, it's easier to remember direct words. So if you find that for one poem I can remember more direct words than another, then you can bolster an essay by kind of quoting a lot from the poem that you remember more from. But you still need to achieve some balance because both poems need to be fully fleshed out. So I've talked about irony in A Stone's Throw, and I've talked a lot about imagery here. So now let's conclude. I'm going to briefly summarize what happened in each poem. Okay. As I'm concluding, it's good to also touch on the devices once more. Essay right here. Up, you can take a look. You can pause this. You can pause it here and double check everything. I used about 33 or so minutes, so I'd have more than 5 minutes to double check everything, to review and get rid of pesky grammatical and spelling errors. It'd be difficult to fix major errors since I only have about five more minutes, but yeah, minor errors can be corrected quite easily, just crossing out and so on. Yeah, just glancing, I'm not seeing any errors, but there might be a few. Anyway, I won't go through the painstaking process of revising this here. You can revise it, and if you catch any errors, let me know. So this is the essay, question 4 of January 2019's CSEC English B paper. Next time, let's go to June 2019.